Hey guys, it's Miss Vinson. Today we're going to talk about supply. So when we talk about supply, I want you to think more about producers and sellers. When we talk about the supply of a product, we're talking about how much of a product is being produced over an entire range of prices. When we talk about the quantity supplied of a product, that's when we're talking about the amount that's being made and produced at one specific price level. So just like there was a distinction between demand and quantity demanded, there's the exact same distinction between supply and quantity supplied. So let's use an example with numbers. So let's say we have these different price levels of painting a room, maybe $0, $20, $40, $60, $80, and $100 to paint a room. Now as a supplier, these are not the prices that you are paying as the supplier. These are the prices that people are paying you to paint a room. All right, so this is the money you're making. This is going to be like your revenue per room painted. So if you don't stand to make any money when you paint a room, if somebody just asks you to paint a room for free, probably not a lot of people are willing to supply their painting services. But let's say the price goes up to $20 a room. Now, if you get paid $20 for every room that you paint, maybe there are a few people that are willing to supply their painting services. Maybe there's 10 people. Maybe they need the money, maybe they need the job. If the price goes up to $40 for every room that you paint, more people are going to be willing to supply their painting services because it is more profitable. So now let's say there's 20 people that are willing to paint at a price of $40 per room. If the price goes up to $60 per room, let's say there's 30 people that want to paint now. If the price of painting a room goes up to $80 per room, more people, maybe now 40 people are willing to jump on board and paint that room. And if the price of painting a room goes up to $100, then probably 50 people are going to be on board. So notice the relationship we have between our variables here. As the price of something goes up and becomes more profitable, more and more people are willing to supply that good or supply that service. So our law of supply says that as the price level goes up, the quantity supplied also goes up. Basically, people are saying, man, that's where the money is. I want to use my time and resources in a way that is profitable. So the more money I stand to make as the price goes up, the more I'm willing to provide this service or good. On the flip side, if the price of something goes down, then that means that it's less profitable for suppliers, and so they're less willing to supply that good or service. So the quantity supply would fall. So price and quantity supplied move in the same direction. They are either both going up or both going down. This is a direct relationship. Now, if we were to take these numbers and put them on a graph and turn them into a picture, then what we're always going to have price on our y-axis, but we're going to have quantity supplied on our x-axis. So on our y-axis, if we were going to graph this, we would have our different price levels that we used in our example. On our x-axis, where we're measuring the quantity of painters supplying their services, we would go from 0 and then 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, because those are the numbers that we used in our example. At a price of 0, if you're not going to get paid anything to paint a room, then that means you're probably not willing to supply any painting services. So 0 is where we put our dot there. But when the price goes up to $20, we said that there were 10 people who are willing to supply their painting services at that price. So the quantity of painters supplied at the price of $20 is 10 painters. When the price went up to $40, there were 20 people willing to supply their painting services. At a price of $60, there were 30 people willing to supply their painting services. At a price of $80, there were 40 people willing to supply their painting services. And then finally, at a price of $100 per room, we had 50 people that were willing to supply their painting services. So when we talk about the quantity of something supplied, that's how much is being produced or available at one specific price level. We're talking about the individual dots on the line. Now when we connect those dots, notice that we have made our upward sloping supply curve. Please remember to label it S1. We always want to get in the habit of labeling everything. Those are easy points, getting everything labeled. When we connect these dots and have the upward sloping supply curve, that curve shows us the overall amount of people willing to supply their painting services over an entire range of prices, from $0 all the way up to $100. Now the supply curve is upward sloping because of the positive or direct relationship between those two variables of price and quantity supplied. So what types of things might affect the quantity supplied or supplied of an item? Think about anything that may affect you as a painter and whether or not you're willing to paint more or less rooms. Well, one thing that might influence your decision whether or not to paint more or less could be the price that you're actually receiving, right? Like we talked about, how much you stand to get paid. So if we're talking about painting, the price of painting could be something that could influence whether or not you wanted to paint more or less. What about the price of your resources? You know, if you're a painter, you have to go out and you have to buy a ladder, you have to go out and you have to buy the paint, you have to buy the brushes and the painter's tape and the drop cloth. And so all these things are the resources that you have to buy just so that you can do the job. These are your resource costs. Well, let's say the price of paint goes down. If paint gets cheaper, then you may be willing to paint more things because you can buy more paint, therefore you can paint more rooms for a cheaper cost. Also, what if the government puts a tax on it? Or what if the government gives you a subsidy? Taxes are always bad things if you're the one with the tax, all right? So if the government puts a tax on painters, then that means that whenever you get money for painting, you have to give some of that money to the government. Well, I don't know about you, but that kind of makes me less willing to paint a room. That's kind of a deterrent. So if the government puts a tax on something, that's going to decrease the supply. But if the government gives painters a subsidy, subsidies are always good things. Subsidies are whenever the government gives financial assistance or tax breaks or financial aid to something that they want to encourage. So if the government wanted to encourage painters, they may give them a subsidy where they pay less taxes overall, or maybe they get some kind of financial aid. Well, if the government gives painters a subsidy, that might make you want to paint more. Another thing that might affect whether or not you wanted to paint is the price of alternative goods. You know, you've got this paint and ladders, and you could paint rooms, but you could also paint pictures. If you are only getting $20 to paint a room, but whenever you paint a picture, you can sell it for $200 using basically the same resources, then you may want to spend your time and resources making a painting which might be more profitable. So we have to think about the price of other things you could use your resources for. And also maybe how easy or hard it is to produce it. If you have a tiny little paintbrush and you're trying to paint a whole room, then that can sometimes be difficult. But what if you had like this airbrush machine, right? And you had this awesome technology that allowed you to paint a whole room in basically 30 minutes. If you had this better technology, you'd be more and more willing to do more jobs and to paint more. So a lot of times production technology, better production technology can make a difference to suppliers. So that list could go on, but again, I want you to point your attention to one specific thing on the list. If we look at the actual price of the item itself, the price of painting, that is the only thing that's going to cause a change in the quantity supplied of painters. Remember our law of supply, the price of the item and quantity supplied go together. If anything else changes that makes you want to produce more or less, then that would just be a change in the overall supply of painting. If you want to show a change in the overall supply of something, then that means that on your graph, you're going to actually be shifting your entire supply curve to the right or to the left, just like we did with demand. But instead of being a downward sloping demand curve that we're shifting, now it's an upward sloping supply curve. So let's talk about some other examples besides painting. Let's say we wanted to show an increase in the supply of peaches. Maybe there's better technology in peach production. Maybe they have better fertilizer technology or things that make the peaches grow hardier and faster. And so if we have better technology in peach production, then that means that peach suppliers are going to make more at all price levels. So we're going to take that supply curve and we're going to shift the whole supply curve to the right. Now we're shifting it horizontally to the right because we're saying that at every price level, the quantity supplied is greater because of this technology. So we're going to have a whole nother supply curve, label it S2, and you want to draw arrows that show that that supply curve is moving horizontally, not diagonally, horizontally to the right. If we wanted to show a decrease in the supply of something, let's say we're talking about strawberries now. If we wanted to show a decrease in the supply of strawberries, well, maybe that could be caused by a frost that came along and killed a whole bunch of the strawberries early on in the season. So if there was an early frost and it killed off a whole bunch of the strawberries, then that means that there is going to be less supply of strawberries at all price levels. So if there's going to be less strawberries at all price levels, we're going to take that supply curve and shift the whole thing to the left. And what we're saying now is that at every price level, there are less strawberries being supplied. The quantity supplied is less at every price level because of this event. So we're going to shift our supply curve to the left and make sure you're shifting it to the left and draw your arrows going horizontally to the left and label that new curve S2. Please don't draw your arrows going diagonally upwards. I know when you draw it, it looks like that new curve is kind of diagonally up, but just know that we've shifted that supply curve only to the left horizontally. To show a change in the quantity supplied of an item, this can only be caused by a change in the actual price of the item itself. Remember our law of supply. We have price and quantity supplied, and we have those two variables together. If we want to show an increase in the quantity supplied of something, maybe we want to show an increase in the quantity supplied of blueberries, then that means that the price of blueberries must have gone up. This is not the price that you're paying. This is the price that you are receiving since you are the seller. What this means is that blueberries are more profitable. So now, instead of getting maybe $2 for a pound of every blueberries, now you're going to get paid $5 for every pound of blueberries. That's going to probably make you want to supply more blueberries. So the quantity of blueberries supplied at $2 a pound may only be 100. But the quantity supplied of blueberries at $5 a pound could be 200. As something becomes more profitable, more and more people want to provide that item. And so notice, we didn't shift our supply curve. We just moved from point to point upwards along our supply curve. So a change in the quantity supplied is just a movement from point to point along the supply curve and is only caused by a change in the actual price of the item itself. If we want to show a decrease in the quantity supplied of something, let's say we want to talk about a decrease in the quantity supplied of sombreros. So why would the quantity supplied be going down? Well, maybe because the price of sombreros is going down. Maybe when you made a sombrero before, you were able to sell it for $50 for every hat. Man, if you were getting paid $50 for every sombrero that you made, maybe there were like 30 people that were making sombreros. But now let's say you can sell a sombrero only for $2. What? You go through all that effort and trouble, and now you're only going to get $2 for every sombrero that you sell? Man, maybe the quantity supplied now is only like 5. Only 5 people are willing to make a sombrero if they're only going to get paid $2 for it. So the less profitable something is, the less people really want to put their resources and time into it. And so notice what happened on our graph. We didn't shift our supply curve. We just had a movement from a high point at a high price to a low point at a low price down along our supply curve. All right, hopefully you got that, because next we're going to take supply and demand, we're going to put them together, and we're going to make a market. So if you get these basics, then it's really going to help you out. All right, see you later.